Hello, and thank you for joining us at Comics Talk, comic and entertainment blog. My name is Travis Vick, and I'm one of the editors and contributors to the site. I'd like to introduce you to W.B. Stiles to talk to him about his book, Project Genesis, The Gathering of Superheroes. Welcome, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Travis.
WB, if you don't mind, why don't we just jump right in?
Okay.
How did you get into writing?
Basically, I couldn't shut my imagination down. These thoughts and visions would come into my mind when I would read a novel or watch a movie. It had to come out, so I began writing. I began writing on paper first, then I got an old word processor. My stories were okay, but the writing style was terrible. I kept at it until I got better and got some books on writing. Then in the late 90s, I was introduced to the computer, and my learning curve increased as I took some online courses and wrote something almost every day. Finally, in 2008, I became a blog writer and started to hone my skill and put my story thoughts on Word and develop my writing style. In 2014, I published my first novel, and I learned a lot about what works and what does not work in publishing. That brings me to where I'm at today.
So, what writers had the biggest influence on you?
Well, when I was young, I read comics and loved Superman. I was intrigued in how written stories were woven with art. My favorite writer at the time was Stan Lee, who wrote Fantastic Four and Spider-Man. At the same time, I read books like Old Yeller, a simple story about the love of a boy and a dog. I read classics like Robinson Crusoe and A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. But the one book that really impressed my young mind was Dune by Frank Herbert. I loved the story with the aspects of sci-fi and fantasy. I was hooked in a world of sci-fi and fantasy literature and later influenced by authors like Stephen King, Neil Gaiman, and Warren Ellis, and many others.
So, I mean, clearly you had some influence from the superhero genre. I can see from what you talked about there. What drew you to write your own superhero story?
For me, it was a natural progression with my love for comics and science fiction and fantasy. It had to happen. I wanted to write about a special people who do things to help others, but never are in the headlines of the paper. Like the men in black, they work behind the scenes and don't draw attention to themselves. It's not like the spectacle and slice and dice in the comics, but they fight behind the scenes. Also, these superheroes are human and have feelings they must deal with. Much of the story will happen without the world knowing these heroes or villains even exist, and the trick is to write it that way.
So I guess the question really does come to mind is, are you a DC or Marvel?
Well, I love both in their own way. DC is epic in story and characters, and Marvel is human and down-to-earth in delivery. Both show the best and the worst in gods and humans, and both have great writers and artists. I feel that comics will exist in some form as long as there are creators and stories and imagination.
I agree. Since this is a superhero novel, can you tell us about the main characters in the book?
Yeah. First there is Jane Watkins. She is the reporter that discovers this world of supernatural by being attacked and then rescued by a person who disappears suddenly. Then she spends the rest of the novel looking for him. Then there's John Tomar, the most powerful of the gathering, and the one who leads them and helps train them, these group of wannabe heroes. He is the adopted son of Nathaniel Tomar, a Native American from the area who is the founder of the group and the heart and soul of the story. And that brings us to the antagonist of the story, Jacob Starr, the CEO of a great international company and a very powerful man in the world of finance and politics and superpowers. he secretly puts thousands of people in great danger for his own personal gain. These people drive the narrative of the book to its ultimate conclusion.
Well, after reading this book, the scope of the story is epic. Any plans for a sequel?
Yes, my book, The Struggle, book 2 of the Project Genesis series, will be in print soon on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and in other retail outlets. There is more development in the complicated lives of the gathering of heroes and more backstory of the main antagonists in the first novel. This is where secrets are revealed that have been kept silent for thousands of years. There's a third book that will be written I hope to release before the end of the year. It's called The Ascension, also part of the Project Genesis series of books.
Any final thoughts?
Yes, I think I have a unique twist in storytelling that you don't read in other versions of sci-fi or fantasy. I would encourage you to check it out on Amazon or Barnes & Noble with everything you need to know at wbstiles.com. That's wbstiles.com with an I. Thank you, Travis, for the interview, and I appreciate you helping me get this message out.
Well, thank you for joining us today. This has been an interview with W.B. Stiles, author of Project Genesis, the Gathering of Superheroes. This is Travis saying support your local comic shop.